Okay, guys, we are on our last lecture of Unit 2, Chapter 9, World War II, and you could not be happier than me that this is the last lecture because I have sat and done these all in a row. All right, let's get on to it. Let's talk about Europe again first. We have what's called the rise of the dictators. All right, your first guy is Joseph Stalin. He is going to take over for Lenin when Lenin dies in 1924. Lenin had created the USSR, communist area, and it's called a totalitarian system because the government has total control, military, economics, people's rights, everything. So Stalin is going to expand this quite a bit. Stalin is also going to have purges where he's going to kill different people, eliminate different political rivals, old Bolsheviks, military leaders, ordinary citizens. He executes about 8 million people. And he's also going to create what's called gulag, which are just like labor camps, but in the snow in Siberia. Okay, Stalin has what's called his 5-year plan. So he is going to take control of Ukraine. He's going to take all their wheat and starve them out. That's actually the first genocide. And he's going to do collectivism, which is abolishing all the farms and taking full control of all the food, which is how he's going to kill off the Ukrainian resistance, because Ukraine actually has the largest wheat source, and when they do the collective farms, all the people who had individual farms, they lose all of their food, all of their money, all of their land. Okay, so we have Stalin. Stalin is going to eventually become an ally when Hitler stabs him in the back, but he's Hitler's buddy to begin with. Mussolini. Mussolini is Italy. He is going to rise up national pride. He is going to build a powerful Italian empire. He is the one that creates fascism, not his idea, but he brings it to the world stage. He's going to use the fear of a communist revolution, the promise of national glory to gain his support. And Mussolini's big deal was called the March on Rome, and that's where he overthrows the sitting government. Now, all dictators, what they all have in common is they have to control public perception. They have to control what news comes in and out. Okay, so when you see news sources being controlled, fake news, news not being allowed to be told from the government shouldn't be telling you what news is fake and what news isn't. You should be able to hear all the different news and then decide for yourself what you believe is right and wrong. But controlling the news is controlling the power. You have to control what the people hear in order to control the people. Okay, so he's going to control the newspapers, anything coming in to his country, he is going to control what is said. He's going to have his secret police that are called the black shirts. So censorship, propaganda, and silencing anybody who goes against what he is saying. And you got to murder off your political opponents, always. Number one for dictator, murder all your political opponents and silence your critics. All right, then we got Tojo. He is not huge on the scene at all in Europe, okay, but he is a major reason of why the U.S. gets into the war. He is over in Asia doing the same things that Hitler is eventually doing. Tojo, once the war starts, he figures, oh, everybody's so involved in Europe, I'm going to start imperialism over here in Asia, and I'm going to start taking control of this area, which we will talk about how that all gets involved later on when they bomb Pearl Harbor. All right, now we got good old Hitler, Adolf Hitler. Okay, so after World War I and the Treaty of Versailles, the U.S. and the Allies had put into control the Weimar Republic in hopes to have a democratic government for the Germans. So what happens is Hitler actually is working for the government, and he is going to go spy on this new uprising workers group called the Nazis, because the government's worried about them. So he goes and spies on this group to see what they're doing, ends up liking them, believing what they're saying, and becomes the head of the party. Okay, he's going to become the head of the Nazis party, which was a workers' party. Okay, so what he does is Hitler blames the Weimar Republic for accepting the Treaty of Versailles. And I told you that the Treaty of Versailles was, a lot of people believe, not fair to the Germans. So the Treaty of Versailles had an unbelievable amount of reparations, which is money, that the Germans had to pay to the other countries that they destroyed, and they had to accept full guilt clause, what's called the war guilt clause. Sorry, talking is becoming a problem now. And of course the humiliation of taking on the total guilt for starting the war. All right, so Hitler's ticked off about that. And he's now becoming involved in the Nazi Party, which is called the National Socialist German Workers' Party, okay, or Nazis. Okay, so Hitler actually fought in World War I. He is going to go along with this idea that it was the Jewish community's fault that they lost the war. He's going to become a powerful public speaker, and by 1921, he's in a solid leadership role. In 23, he's going to have a failed attempt in Munich of trying to overthrow the government. He then will be imprisoned for a year. That's where he writes Mein Kampf, which is going to be his strategy, which means my struggle. And he believes that the German race is superior and should be raised up and be the top. So his plan is always to take over the USSR and enslave them, but he has to be friends with Stalin first before he can do that. So Stalin is our enemy. Stalin did a lot of horrible things with the Holocaust, but he becomes an ally once Hitler attacks him in Stalingrad. All right, getting back to it, sorry. So Hitler rises very, very fast. He rises by make Germany great again is his slogan. He used propaganda to keep America out of our business. He appeals to the German people who fought in World War I or lost people in World War I, that, you know, what they did was not in vain. Let's, you know, rise back up. He appeals to people over Germans' humiliation for being punished and having to take the total fault of the war. So he eventually rises and becomes what's called a Chandler. And in February 1933, you've got the Reichstag fire. And this was a building that held all the papers, the Constitution, and everything else. Well, that burns, and there's no Constitution, there's no records, there's no nothing. So Hitler's working with these other groups, and he's like, hey, let me have the power to start rewriting our Constitution. Okay, there was a fire, we're going to blame it on the communists. Let me rewrite the Constitution, give me the power. So the other two parties say, okay, we'll create this thing called the Enabling Act in 1933, and it's going to give Hitler the power to start rewriting the laws, which, shocker, he does not. So he writes the law that Germany is now a one-party dictator, and he is the dictator. And that becomes the law and shuts down everything else. Now the people are loving him because he's convincing the people that the Aryans are the master race and that this is the fault of the Jewish people and all of their political rivals. And now remember, when we talk about the Germans and the Jewish were Germans. Okay, it's just a different religion. All right. Sorry, it's hard for a world historian to. All right. Like I said before, he rises to power by, using German anger over the Treaty of Versailles, blaming the Weimar Republic, and, calling for a change in this national humiliation that Germany had to suffer through by taking the war guilt claw. Promotes the idea of the Aryan race being the superior race. The Jewish people are going to be portrayed as evil and be the reason why they were defeated in World War I. Also, that they're spreading communism, which everybody is scared of at the moment. His vision, of course, is the Third Reich. The First Reich was the Holy Roman Empire. Second Reich, the German Empire. He wants to create the all-new Aryan Empire. Okay, so to do that, he has to have the lands in the East, especially the Soviet Union. He's going to use the Slavic populations as forced labor to build his new racial state. All right, and all this ideology is justified under harsh discrimination laws beginning in 1933, which were the Nuremberg laws. I think that I have really covered a whole lot of this. The 1935 Nuremberg laws are going to strip the Jews of citizenship, define what German identity is. Now remember, the Jewish people were German, okay? There's not German and Jews, they were one. But the new German identity calls for the purity of blood. That requires three decades of pure German blood. Okay, the Jews had to register as being Jewish, wearing the star. You have the Gestapo, like we talked about before. A dictator has to get rid of anybody who's in opposition of him. You have to have the secret police. For Hitler, it's the Gestapo. You have to have full control over what is being told, what news is coming in. So the Nazis will then control all the institutions. He's going to get rid of any government officials who are not in stand-in with his party. All right, and then he's going to work on getting rid of anybody who is not Aryan and who does not fit the script of the person that he wants to start his new empire with. All right, still discussing how World War II begins. So you have this political instability that follows World War I. You have the other European countries are seeing how Hitler is breaking the Treaty of Versailles. So Hitler begins breaking the treaty. He was not supposed to build a military, he builds a military. He was not supposed to step into the Rhineland, which was this buffer zone, so he could not get out to any of the countries to start a war. Actually, Germany wasn't supposed to do all these things, but Hitler's the one doing them. So he then brings weapons into the Rhineland. All of these are direct violations of the Treaty of Versailles. So what happens is the European countries follow what's called the policy of appeasement. If they just let Hitler rebuild his army, he'll be fine. Okay, they'll let him bring some weapons into the Rhineland. He's not going to do anything with it. This will keep the peace. Let's just let him do that one thing. Okay, and those one things and those one things and those one things start to add up and give him full power. So the final tip of the iceberg comes with when Hitler decides that if he could just have a piece of Czechoslovakia, just a little piece, then he'll stop. And they go to the Munich conference with the Allies. They discuss this. Hey, you got to stop doing what you're doing. And Hitler's like, yeah, just give me a tiny piece of Czechoslovakia and I'm good. And they agree. The European countries going away believing that they've now solved this problem. And of course, Hitler goes away knowing that he can now do whatever he wants to do. And in the meantime, he has buddied up with Japan, with Italy, and with Russia. He doesn't want to deal with them. He doesn't want to fight with them. He's made allies of all of them and signed pacts. And now he can just focus on his taking over of Europe. Okay, so the spark comes. The war begins September 1939. Germany invades Poland. Poland is neutral, okay? It's protected under international law. You cannot invade Poland. So as soon as Germany invades Poland, Britain and France declare war on Germany, and this begins World War II. The United States. Again, the United States are isolationist. They want to stay out of what's going on in Germany. All right, so like we talked about before, Hitler makes friends with Russia and with Japan. Okay, our issue is going to be with Japan. The United States is going to have an issue with Japan. So on December 7th, 1941, Japan launches a surprise attack on our naval base in Hawaii, Pearl Harbor. So the Americans had broken up some Japanese code and knew an attack was likely, but the U.S. leaders assumed that it would target, would be somewhere with the British and Dutch territories, not Hawaii. Hawaii wasn't an active base. They were just there. So Japan sends and strikes 6 aircraft carriers, 400 planes, 2 battleships, 2 cruisers, 9 destroyers, and 40 support vessels. So they sail across the Pacific under complete radio silence. When the attack came, the United States was unprepared. It just had a few hours before Japan sank the battleship of Arizona and Oklahoma. It destroyed 16 other vessels and wiped out roughly around 300 American aircrafts. More than 2,400 Americans were killed, and the damage could have been a lot worse had the U.S. aircraft carriers been in port. So on the next day, December 8th, the United States declares war on Japan. In response, Germany and Italy, Japan's allies, they declare war on the United States. Okay, so now Germany has declared war on the United States for what Japan had done. So the U.S. then joins the Allies, Britain, and now the Soviet Union is part of the Allies. And they're going to first focus on defeating Germany in what's called the European theater. And then they're going to turn their full military strength on Japan, which is called the Pacific theater. All right, how did and why did Japan decide to attack Pearl Harbor? So this is going to grow out of this long-term ambitions of Japan in Asia to take over Asia. So Japan rapidly starts industrializing. They're behind. Europe starts everything. Europe begins industrialization. Then it kind of flows to the United States. They begin it. Then those ideas flow to other parts of the world. So we're starting World War II, and Japan is just starting their industrialization. After industrialization becomes the need for raw materials, which goes into imperialism. So Japan wants to take over different countries. They start their imperial expansion with invading different areas in China in 1937. So what happens is American ships get attacked, and leaders start worrying about the increased influence that Japan is having. So they decide that they need to dominate more of the East and Southeast. They believe that Japan is just getting into too many different areas that the United States really has a sphere of influence over. So Japan sees the war that Hitler's doing in Europe and how Hitler's taken over all the countries, and he believes that that's going to be a huge distraction. Okay, so Japan starts to seize different territories and does not believe that the West, the US, is going to do anything about it. So the United States starts to see this aggression that the Japanese are having, and they tell the Japanese to stop taking over areas. The Japanese do not stop, so they create what's called an embargo, the US, on oil, steel, and machinery. This is going to cut off 80% of Japan's oil supply. Japan did not do what they wanted to do, so American leaders warn that the embargo will continue unless Japan stops invading other Asian countries. So, facing economic collapse and unwilling to retreat, Japan concludes that war with the United States is uneventable. It's going to happen, but it's going to be quick and short, and the U.S., they're not going to be able to really fight back, and they're going to lose interest fast. They're not going to want to go to war with Japan. They've got bigger fish to fry. So Japan assumes that it'll be short and quick, but they want to deliver a very decisive, very crippling attack. So they're going to hit the U.S. fleet, Pacific Fleet, and then they're figuring that they'll force America into some negotiation peace. And then Japan can join Germany and Italy and continue expanding into the Asian countries like it wants to. So their whole theory is on the idea that the U.S. will not fight back. So they choose to attack Pearl Harbor, believing that once they do that, the U.S. will just want to have a peace pact with them, and then they can continue to secure the Eastern Asia countries that they're wanting to have. But they were wrong. All right. So that's how we get into the war with Japan and why they think they can attack us. So we're going to flip back to Europe because the whole plan is for the United States to come in with the Allies. We're going to take care of the European theater. That's what's going on in Europe with Hitler. And then the Allies and the U.S. will put their full force on the Pacific theater, which is Japan. All right, so after entering the war in 1941, we joined the Allies. We're going to go with Europe First strategy. We're going to end what's going on. We're going to defeat the Nazis, release people from the concentration camps, and end the war in Europe. And this approach was based on the belief that Germany was the greatest and immediate threat to global stability, and also that it could be taken care of quickly. So the famous battle is the Beaches of Normandy, the Battle of Normandy, which actually is part of a greater military attack. So the idea is that the U.S. continued to fight defensive battles in the Pacific, which it was starting, and then, like I said, we'll take care of Europe and then turn our full forces on the Pacific. So D-Day, the invasion and the collapse of Nazi Germany, is the invasion of Normandy, the Battle of Normandy, June 6, 1944, D-Day. So Allied forces are going to launch the greatest Navy, air, ground invasion in history on the beaches of Normandy, France. So it's a massive naval and air operation. The British, American, Canadian troops are going to fight their way ashore through underwater mines, barbed wire, intense machine gun fire, heavy resistance, and take the beachhead, which is what's blocking them from getting into Germany. And they're going to begin a land attack, all right, from the ocean. And you can kind of see all the different areas of everybody invaded. Okay, so you had a lot go wrong and a lot go right. But what's going to happen is they're going to push through inland. They're going to break the German defense lines by taking the beachhead. And they're going to meet up. The Soviets are going to advance from a different area. They're going to come back through Poland and Eastern Germany. And they're going to advance one way. And the American allies will advance another way. And they're going to trap and get Germany. So the success of D-Day really marked a major turning point in the war. And it's going to open the Western Front and force Germany into a two-front war. And this is going to set the stage of defeat in Germany. Okay. The main part of U.S. history is in the Pacific Theater. Okay. And that's with Japan. So we've got a few things going on. We've already talked about ending the war in Germany, but we've got to talk about the Pacific Theater and taking care of Japan. All right, so we have a few important battles here. The one battle is the Battle of Midway. It's fought in June of 1942. Again, we're in the Pacific Theater now of the war. We're not messing with Germany and Europe. We are completely in the Pacific going after Japan. So the United States anticipates and prepares for different attacks. So they want to ambush an island called Midway. And in a single day, they're going to deal with fierce fighting. They're going to sink Japanese aircraft carriers, the actual ones that were used on Pearl Harbor. And they're going to take over Japanese planes, hundreds of planes. This is going to weaken Japan's offensive power, and what it's going to do is it's going to stop their ability to expand across the Pacific. So whereas Japan was in offensive, attacking, they have now been flipped to a completely defensive status, why the United States is going to gain strategic advantage and keep on moving and moving and moving. So the Battle of Midway is where this flip comes. Japan is no longer offensive. They now have to go into a defensive mode. And it is going to also be where the U.S. begins what they call island hopping campaign. They're just going to hop and take over each island, leading to the mainland of Japan. Another important battle is the Battle of Iwo Jima in 1945. This is going to be a very bloody, very intense battle of the Pacific Theater. The importance of this island is that it holds an airfield. It had 2 Japanese airfields. Having the airfield is going to help the American bombers have a place to launch attacks and land on this island. So the Japanese refuse to surrender, and it's not until the U.S. Marines land on the beaches and face heavy machine guns and difficult terrain, because this is a volcanic island, that they finally are able to plant the flag, take the island, and this victory is going to give the Allies a very critical air base for their operations. And it's actually one step away from the final invasion of Japan. All right, we're going to flip back over to Europe to see what's going on there. So we're at the end. All the Allied leaders are meeting. So you have from left to right, you have Roosevelt, Churchill, and then you have Stalin. Stalin is only in here as a major ally, again, remember, because Hitler breaks the alliance they had with Stalin, USSR, and attacks at Stalingrad. Okay? This is important because right after World War II, we go into the Cold War with the U.S. against Stalin, and we're there for quite a while. Okay, so they're going to meet at the Tehran Conference in 1943, then again in 1945 at the Yalta Conference to kind of decide what is going to happen with Europe, how they're going to punish Germany, and how they want to go forward to prevent any type of global conflict from happening again. Hitler is actually going to commit suicide April 30th, 1945, before the Allies close in on him at his bunker. Okay, so the Allies are going to create in 1945 the United Nations. This is going to replace the League of Nations that never took off. The United Nations still exists today. It is a way of promoting peace, cooperation, human rights worldwide. The United Nations also has a branch to hold world leaders accountable for any crimes against humanity. So this is how they're going to prosecute the Nazis who committed all of these different acts in a international court, basically. And these are called the Nuremberg trials. They go from November 1945 to October 1906, and it's where they're going to try the leading Nazis for war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. And that is how they are going to punish the people who, although they were following orders from Hitler, that did not matter. All right. The other thing is that they are going to take Germany and they're going to divide Germany into 4 occupational zones. One controlled by the United States, one controlled by Britain, France, and the Soviet Union. That right there, those occupation zones, that is going to lead directly to the Cold War, which begins in 1945 between the U.S. and the Soviets. But we will come back to that later. Okay, let's go back to Japan now that we know that Europe is all neatly tied up. Okay, so in 1945, the United States was developing and testing the atomic bomb. Okay, this is a weapon that was created by partly by Albert Einstein. Fearing that the Nazis might be building a similar device, Einstein was actually Jewish and was rescued from Germany. So Einstein urged the U.S. government to begin its own research, which led to what's called the Manhattan Project in New Mexico, which was a top secret project. So August 6, 1945, Japan is not surrendering. The United States drops their first bomb. They have no idea whether or not the bomb is going to work or not. They dropped the first bomb called Little Boy on the Japanese city of Hiroshima. Okay, expecting that at that drop, the Japanese will surrender. And you're going to have more detailed assignments and videos over Hiroshima and dropping of the atomic bomb also on Nagasaki. So the Japanese do not surrender. 3 days later, August 9th, a second bomb, Fat Man, was dropped on Nagasaki. The cause of these bombings was Japan's refusal to surrender, and the belief that an invasion of Japan would result in massive American and further Japanese casualties. So you will have to kind of think on your own and answer the question on your own, was it justified? These bombs were not dropped on military targets, they were dropped on large Japanese cities, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and they're going to do incredible damage. Like I said, I'm going to put actual film of the drop-in of the bombs and the damage. You will have to justify in your own mind whether or not they were actually justified. The U.S. justification for dropping the bombs is that Japan would not surrender, and had they kept going in battle against Japan, we would have lost more American lives. So this is why the bombs were dropped. The effects of the bombs are going to be immediate. People are going to be incinerated. Both cities are going to be devastated. Tens of thousands will be killed instantly. And then you're also going to have this prolonged health issues that will kill more and more down the road. But Japan will surrender August 15, 1945, which is going to end World War II. All right, so this is the actual, well, a picture in its color now, of Enola Gay, which was the mother of the pilot. Tibbets is the pilot who was flying the first plane on the 6th, August 6th, to drop the bomb. Okay, so a few other things that we need to talk about are when the United States entered World War II after the attack on Pearl Harbor, millions of Americans are going to rush to enlist. Everybody wanted the high school senior classes are going to empty as everybody wants to go and fight this war because America was attacked. Pearl Harbor is the first attack on American soil, and then the second attack on American soil on the homeland would be September 11th. All right, so millions of Americans are going to rush to enlist. This is going to just transform the nation's military overnight. My father was one of the men, 17-year-old, who lied about his age and enlisted to go to war. Okay, so young men line up. Then you also have the draft through the selective service system. So you are going to very quickly have over 12 million service members by 1945. And this is only 20 years after World War I. It's not a lot of time. Okay, so you have patriotic songs, patriotic posters, campaigns encouraging citizens to join the fight. the military service. Again, we were attacked this time. So there's this whole nationalistic pride and let's go get who attacked us at Pearl Harbor. So you have the same things that are going to happen on the home front, Victory Gardens, and total war, the whole community, all of America, over the United States, coming together to support this war effort. All right, but let's look at a few things. We have the Tuskegee Airmen. There's still segregation at this time. So these group of airmen are the first African American military pilots in U.S. history, because at the idea you had these racial barriers that African American could not possibly fly a plane. But these guys are going to prove them different. They're going to come from Alabama, the Tuskegee Army Airfield in 1941. They're going to train with just intense scrutiny from military leaders who just had no belief in them at all. But these airmen are going to excel. They're going to start combat missions in 1943. They're going to fly in missions to North Africa, Italy, Germany, and they're also going to protect American bombers by escorting them and protecting them from any type of enemy fighters. Okay? They had very distinctive red painted aircraft, and that gave them the name Red Tails. There's about 1,500 of these men who are going to fight in this elite force, and they're not going to get recognized for quite a while. The military was still segregated. Okay, it starts to get desegregated in 1948, which is a major step, but even though you had desegregation, there still was not equality. The other group are the Navajo Code Talkers. These guys had a very secret language that was very hard for anyone to learn, and they were able to also break Japan's code, and they're going to be unbelievably valuable in the Pacific theater. Then we've got one more guy we're going to talk about, and that is Vernon J. Baker. He is an African American Army officer who he's going to serve in an all-black unit, the 92nd Infantry Division. Okay, so there is still segregation. Although it's supposed to be desegregated, we still have an all-black unit, an all-white unit. So in 1944, while fighting in Italy, he led assault against a very heavily fortified German position, and under intense fire, he's going to crawl through these minefields. He's going to destroy enemy machine gun nests, eliminate snipers, and he just guides his men through this impossible mission. But his actions, what he did, clear the way for the American forces to advance. So he is going to get this credit. He's not going to get top military honors, not until 1997. That is when he's going to receive the Medal of Honor, and he's going to, which is the highest medal that you can receive, and he's going to be one of the very few African American soldiers to ever receive it. All right, let's talk about the home front real quickly. It's our last slide. So, like I said before, you have the United States home front. It's going to play a critical role in the war effort. You have the same things that we talked about before. You have the encouragement to buy war bonds to pay for the war. You have the women leaving their homes and coming even more involved in creating weapons, ships, and supplies for the military. You have rationing, so limited sugar, meat, canned goods, so all those resources could be sent over to the soldiers in World War II. The soldiers in World War II, from home, they would get a comic book, a bar of chocolate, and a box of cigarettes. That was their little fun pack that they would get. All right, the other thing that we had, because we're trying to send so many of our resources to our soldiers who are fighting, is they have a thing called victory gardens. And victory gardens were just groups like a community planting gardens and growing vegetables in public parks or growing them in their backyard. And this is supposed to help, the national food supply. You could send more and more. The more you sacrificed, the more you grew from yourself at home, the more of the national food supply that could be sent to the soldiers overseas. So you're going to have millions of women, African American women are going to enter the workforce. They're going to take over these vacant jobs by the man. They're going to do things that were not thought of that they could do. They're going to face many obstacles. And when the men come back, they don't exactly want to leave. You have also the Executive Order 9066. This is by Franklin Roosevelt in 1942. And what it did was authorize U.S. military to remove anyone designated in a military zone. So although the orders never mention a specific group, the group that's going to be targeted is going to be the Japanese Americans who are fighting Japan. They are extremely worried. So if you had any type of Japanese ancestry, you were removed and put into a government camp. This is going to be over 120,000 Japanese Americans. 2/3 of them are U.S. citizens. So they're going to be put into camps. They're going to assign all of their assets over, their businesses, their properties. They only have days of notice. And this is because of fear and suspicion that there are Japanese Americans who are going to aid Japan who just attacked us. Again, zero evidence, just fear. So these people are stripped of their citizenship, stripped of their rights, although they were born in America, and they're going to be put into camps. There's actually, these are called Japanese internment camps, and there was actually a Japanese internment camp right outside of Mesquite in Seagoville. All right, that's what we're going to end for this unit, and I will put this into Classroom and make sure that you also watch the different videos that I'm going to put in there.